Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpit Queen, reporting from my little cabin in the woods, Murphy's Law, where it is raining cats and dogs. And I've just brought our author of the week, Betty Lee Crosby, on, and it's storming where she's at too. So we're praying, fingers crossed, that we'll keep our internet connections. But Betty Lee Crosby, welcome to the online book club meeting.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm actually going to put you on gallery view now. So I want you to talk to everyone and tell them a little bit about yourself and about your books. Here we go. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I've been writing for about 11 years. I didn't start out to be a writer. I started out to be an artist, and I quite stumbled into it through the back door. I was an artist right out of college, and I was designing pantyhose packaging. And salesmen are terribly notorious for fluffing off detail work. So I said to the salesman, I had the package all designed. I thought it looked really cool. And I said to the salesman, I need some, excuse me, sir, I need some copy for the back of this package. He said, make something up, kid. Whatever you make up is okay for me. So I did. And I started writing. And they said, gee, you're pretty good at this. You want to write the company newsletter? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? And it just kind of grew. So I wrote many years for business. I wrote speeches, magazine articles, things like that, all kinds of promotional materials. And then I've always had a huge love of reading, but it was more what I enjoyed doing. I never thought of actually working at it. And then people used to say to me, gee, you're really a good writer. Have you ever thought of writing a book? And you know what my answer was? I said, I have nothing to write a book about. Here I am 24 books later. I had something and I just didn't know it. A Million Little Lies it's a delightful little story. I had just done Emily Gone, and that was a pretty heavy story in that it involved a kidnapping. Many of my books are set back into time. Emily Gone, I think, was set in the 70s and around Woodstock. And so you can get away with something there that you can't really do nowadays. Nowadays, a baby taken would be carried off instantly. I mean, they'd be track it down, before you could blink an eye. But back then, you didn't have all the technology that you have now. So it was feasible that it could happen the way it was in the book. But after I wrote that, and it was kind of a heavy story and very intense, it had three main protagonists. And the honest truth is you felt for all three of them, even the antagonist, that took the baby. So it was kind of an interesting thing. And I got so into each one of those characters that I felt I needed a little bit of a break. So after I wrote that, I kind of go back and swing back and forth between writing something that's light and writing something that's really intense. So after that, I decided to do something light, and I wrote A Million Little Lies. And this is it's a fun story, but it's a fun story with a whole lot of heart. It's the tale of a young woman who starts out lying when she's 10 years old because her mother has passed away and her daddy is a drunk. And so she lies about her home life and she says, oh, everything is fine. And, she tells stories of vacations that never happened and, family dinner with her dad. So she really lies to protect her heart. And as she grows up, that becomes a real weakness because she falls in love with the young man who takes advantage of her, and she ends up pregnant, has a baby, and her daddy throws her out, and she goes to live with this older man, not older, but older than her, not an old man. And he's a very unsavory character. So finally she gets to the point when her daughter is 7 years old, she gets to the point where she decides she's had enough. And she's a fun character to work with because she just has that Florida slang and, I'm out of here kind of attitude. And so she takes her daughter one morning while he's sleeping off a hangover, and they go out to the road and hitchhike with a truck driver. And he takes them as far as Georgia. And he says, this is as far as I go. And he lets them out. Then they're sitting, she has very little money. I mean, she's, hand to mouth life. She's sitting in the bus station thinking how she's going to get from there to New Jersey. She has a friend that one time lived in New Jersey and she thinks she might look her up. So she's sitting there and she spots a flyer on the bench that says it's a memorial service for this important person, man in town. Come one, come all, complimentary buffet luncheon. So she says, well, let's go there and we'll have a free lunch and, we'll go from there. So she does go. And when she walks in and she's going through the buffet over to the buffet table, and this woman spots her and she says, Darlene. And the woman who is the widow of the man mistakes her for a baby that was taken away by her dad when she was a baby. So she's convinced, her husband always said, Darlene will come back. So she's convinced that Darlene has come back and she's here at the funeral. So of course, Susanna tries to get out of there without too much of an embarrassment, and that fails. And she ends up becoming very fond of the older woman, and the old woman takes her in, and it's quite a May-December friendship that develops. And of course, just about time her life gets perfect, the past shows up and finds her. So
it's amazing.
Southern fiction, right?
Yes. And it sounds like, anybody that makes up stories to protect their heart, they're a future writer.
So, pretty much so.
And so
actually, the book I'm working on.
All of these stories, where are they? I mean, how does each one begin? Where do the ideas come from?
I have a fun story, a fun book I wrote, about a year ago, I guess. It's called The Storyteller's Secrets. And in it, because each story I've written has some story behind it, something that reminded me of it. When I wrote Emily Gone, it was the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, and I watched videos from Woodstock and everything, and it just triggered that, and I said, gee, I've never done anything along that line, a kidnapping line. So there was always something. When I wrote Spare Change, Dick and I were on vacation, and we drove out to the eastern shore of Virginia to visit some friends that lived way out there. And as we're driving this long strip of island, I said, good grief, this place is lonely. Murder could happen out here and no one would know it. So there's always some little thing like that, some story behind it. Baby Girl is based on a true story, and that one won scads of awards. But, it was the story of a young, actually, she's one of my followers. She's a fan of mine. And she posted a picture on Facebook of this beautiful young girl. And she said, this is my daughter who's 18 years old. She's the baby I gave away. And I said, oh my goodness, that's really something. She's beautiful and so on. And she wrote back to me and she said to me, if you ever want to tell a story from the birth mother's perspective, I'll tell you mine. That's like, waving a red flag in front of a bull. Of course, I'm going to tell that story. But she told me her story. And a lot of my readers are Christian fiction readers. And my stories are not Christian fiction, but, by the same token, they are pretty clean and wholesome. And this girl had a lot of ups and downs before she got to where she is. So she told me this story, and I'm thinking, should I do this? And I ended up writing it, and I wrote it pretty much true to the way it was. But, I wrote it with an eye to sensitivity to her situation. I mean, she was unhappy. She never meant for some of these things to happen. They just did. And it ended up really wonderful, and it just garnered so many awards. And the beauty of the story is that when the book was published, she took it and she sent it to her daughter because her daughter was over 18 then. She had not seen that dog. She knew the family. It was an arranged adoption. And so she sent the book to the daughter and said, if you ever wondered, this is my story of when I was carrying you. And because after that, she went on to have a number of other children. So she now has like seven, six plus the one I think that was adopted. But her at first, her daughter, the adopted daughter, said, "How could you tell this story to the whole world before you told me?" And then she realized something, that it brought them together. And do you know they met for coffee and they have a relationship now where the girl is part of her family.
It's wonderful.
She's like a cousin or something. She just fits right in with all her other kids. Isn't that amazing?
It's really amazing. I grew up with a lot of children that were adopted, and it's a lot different now, especially since Lisa Wingate brought out the book, before we were yours.
Oh, yeah.
And it made us aware that these adoption agencies weren't always, and now they're investigating, I think, all of them. So I'm sure more stories will be coming out, but that's the wonderful thing about your books, is that it opens up into, lets us walk in someone else's shoes for a while to see what that perspective must be like. And but you've written 24 books.
Yeah.
And you write them pretty fast.
It amazes me.
How do you do that? I mean, what's your
I
process?
don't feel like I'm fast, really, because I see so many authors that they can churn out a book in a month or two.
Oh,
And I take a good 6 months, I think, to write a book.
6 months. I think it took 6 years to write my first one.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
pretty impressed.
sometimes it's longer, like after between Emily Gone and A Million Little Lies was a year. And then it was a year from when I wrote A Million Little Lies until I wrote the one that's out now, When I Last Saw You. And that's just recently published. And I think part of that was during COVID, that it was very hard to write. You couldn't lose yourself completely in a book or a character. At least I couldn't, and God knows I had time to write. But for some reason, I was missing the social interaction that spurs these ideas. I was missing somebody telling me, "Hey, you want to hear this story? You know what happened to me yesterday? You know what I saw at the store, or this or that." But there's always something that kind of triggers my mind and makes me start going down that rabbit hole to find that story. And usually what I'll do is look at a story and say, what if it happened not this way, but the other way, just exactly the opposite? So that's always a fun venture too.
So you've just finished another book, and are you already thinking about another book?
I've already started it. I swear, every time I finish one, when I get near the end and then I have to do all the proofreading and go over all the edits and everything like that, I say, I'm busy all the time. I should really take a break in between these. As soon as I finish this book, I'm taking a break, absolutely, positively. And I finish it and a week goes by and I say, I've got this really good idea. My husband says, I knew it. I just knew it.
Oh, now does your husband read your books?
Mostly. Not as I'm writing them.
No.
A few he has. The story Cracks in the Sidewalk, that book, that also is based on a true story, and that is a heartbreaking story. It was friends of ours. The man who's the grandfather in the book was actually on the Seton Hall board of directors for the business school with Dick. And so they were fairly friendly, and we used to get together with them and go to dinner, and we were friends. And she told me the story of how her daughter had passed away and her son-in-law had taken the children and wouldn't let them see him. Oh. And he just ran off with them. And he borrowed all kinds of money from the father, from the man in the story, the grandfather, the girl's grandfather. And it was such a long and the terrible, terrible things the son-in-law did when his wife her name was Elizabeth. When she got sick, she was pregnant with their third child. They couldn't do a CAT scan or a brain scan right away. She had terrible headaches, and that she had to wait until she delivered the baby to have the brain scan. And when they did, they found that it was an inoperable tumor.
Oh,
So she's in the hospital and they know she is terminal. They don't know how long, they think months maybe. But do you know her husband would not let her come back to the house? He said it'll be bad for the children. He made her mother and father take her home to their house. How cruel is that? And I knew that story probably for 10 years before I wrote it. And the only time that I decided to write it was while we were friends with them and, going out with them and everything. One of the children the children had grown up in the meantime. And one of the children got in touch with her and they were getting together again. And I said, now the story has a happy ending. I could tell it. I hate books that leave me really, really sad. I hate to go through the misery of a story and then have it end sad. I don't mind going through the misery and then the sun comes over the mountain or something, but I really don't like it when I go through 300, 400 pages and then everybody dies. I mean, I loved the book, The Four Winds.
yes.
And it was a fantastic story, well told, absolutely true. And I do a lot of research and really it rang so true. But it had such a sad ending. And it just seems like if you go through all of that, you should be able to get somewhere.
Or at least have hope.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind left us with hope. We didn't know how the story was going to end, but we were hopeful.
Yeah.
So if you can leave some sense of things might change for the better,
Yeah.
I feel good about it. But I'm kind of like you. The Lovely Bones was the beautifully written book, but it haunts me and how the guy never got caught. I shouldn't give away the end of the book, but if you know anything about that book,
I do. I've read it.
It was really troubling to me, but it was so well written that I read the whole book, but I left very sad.
Yeah.
Very
I know.
sad.
And my philosophy is, and you know what, this is just me. There's no right or wrong about it. People read what they really enjoy reading. And some people like the bloodiest things you can possibly think of. But, my feeling is I want to feel better when I finish the book than I did, before I read it or before I started it. So I kind of gear myself to write that kind of a book.
Well, that's what fiction gives us the ability to do, is to fictionalize a story so it has the ending that we want, because real life, there's a lot of very unhappy endings.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can read those in nonfiction documentaries or stories or memoirs or whatever, but I like to be left with a hopeful heart.
Absolutely. And I think it's neat because you can have what is a quote happy ending without being a predictable ending. I mean, happy is not always, the guy gets the girl and they ride off into the sunset. That's not always what happy is. And in many of my books, that's not the pathway it goes down. But when you get to the end of the book, you feel like it's poetic justice, if you will. You feel satisfied.
And we've all had probably the occasion when you've read a book and it just ends so abruptly, you're going, what?
Yeah. You're turning the page and like, there's got to be more here. There's got to be
more. You just left me hanging, and then, sequel.
Yeah.
It's coming, but
I have a few books that are in part of a series, but I have to be perfectly honest, they are not series books. I really write standalones. I started reading like when I was 2, I think. And I think I always read standalone books, and I read people like Ann Tyler and Elizabeth Berg and people like that, they write one book a year and it was a standalone. And so when I started writing, I just gravitated to that format of writing a standalone. And I never meant for any of them to be a series. But I wrote Spare Change and it became so tremendously popular. And that was my first book to hit the USA Today bestseller list. And people would say to me, there's got to be a book after this, right? What now? I mean, aren't you going to go back there and write more about that? So I said, well, so although they're part of a series, the only connection in all 5 of those books really is the town. At some point, someone goes through Wyattsville or moves to Wyattsville or comes from Wyattsville, but it's really the town. So it's not a family of sisters or brothers that, are taking on these adventures. It really is just the town.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. If you were speaking to a group of young writers, what advice would you give to them on getting started with this, dream of a career? What would you say to somebody who was just getting started?
I think I'd say don't give up. I mean, stay with it. Write a page a day. You look at, if you stand back and say, I'm going to write a book, that's an overwhelming thing to take on. You say, holy cow. No, don't do that. Be kind to yourself. Write a story, a short story, a page or 2. It can be a story about, and write about something that you feel comfortable and familiar with, because if you're familiar with it, you'll be able to be the character that you're writing about. That I think is the key to my books. Is every book that I've written, I had to virtually live almost the life of the character that I was writing about. I'm writing one now, and there was a big sleet and ice storm in New York in my book. And I'm describing how it was icy and slick and the rain was coming in buckets, And so Dick hollered in and he said, hey, Betty, can you take the dog out tonight? So I said, yeah, sure. I just got to change my pants so I don't get wet. I'm like, it's not raining out there. It's raining in my book. But, I was so engrossed in what I was doing. It was just like an absent-minded reaction. But, that's the kind of mindset I think you have to get into if you want to be so honest with your characters. And the more honest you are with your characters, the more the readers will believe them. And there's no thing like such a small detail that it doesn't warrant you to take a look at it. If you're writing about a time period, make sure you've got the facts right. Just the internet is so easy to check stuff on. I mean, my gosh, I must be on there 50 times a day, just checking each little niddly pits thing. And even my husband says, really, you have to do that much research? But, it's part of the fun, I think, of writing, because the more you do, and the deeper you sink into the research, the more you get to know the story and your characters.
That's so
I'd say stick with it, write honestly, write from your heart. Never write to market, never write because you think this is what's going to sell. Write what you find in your heart. And people will come to you. It doesn't matter if that's the red hot genre of the day. As hot as 50 Shades of Grey was, I couldn't write that if my life depended on it.
I've read that they can't even get anybody to take these books now, that the resale value on them is Zippo of that particular book. And it was just one of those little cult things that happened, that was controversial and everybody wanted to see what it was all about. But a good story is a good story. And so you do a lot of research and you do it mostly on the internet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it makes the story so much better if you make sure that the flowers are actually flowers that bloom in that state. I had an author have a book set in Texas and the front of her cover was English wildflowers. And I was her publisher picked the cover and I was just like, please, read the book before you do the cover. I think this is often just completely overlooked. And it just makes sense to me that the author should have more say in their book cover. But everything in publishing is changing right now. What has been the biggest changes for you since you started your work? Have you published with all the same publisher?
No, I haven't. I published a couple of books with Amazon's Lake Union imprint.
Right.
I published Emily Gone and Summer of New Beginnings and Year of Extraordinary Moments with Amazon's Lake Union imprint. Before that, I published, the first book I published was with a small publisher, and it was before ebooks became popular.
Oh,
And it actually, that book is The 12th Child. Back then, they said, oh, well, that title will never sell. So we're changing it to Girl Child. So they changed the title to Girl Child and published the book. And it was really paperback that was selling then. So it came out at 1999. So I said, oh, that's high, but you know. So I went around, I did speaking engagements at the women's clubs and everything, and I did some book signings locally and things like that. And lo and behold, the book started to sell, you know. And so when it started to sell, they raised the price to $24.99.
oh
I
my
said, you're
God.
kidding me.
Oh,
John Grisham can't sell a paperback book at $24.99. So I just said, well, I'm not going to write for them anymore. So I continued to write, but I continued to write, but I didn't give them any more books. And then they came back to me once ebooks came out and started to get popular. They came back and said, we'd like you to give us the rights to the ebook. So I said, no. I mean, you overpriced the paperback. Why would I give you the rights to the ebook? And so they said, well, if that's the case, then you can buy your contract back. So I said, okay. So I did. And Dick and I started a publishing company. He was at the stage where he was kind of ready to retire, but not totally. And, you know, he said, I want to do something. I don't want to just sit around. And, you know, you can only play golf so often. And so I said, well, what do you think of the idea of becoming a publisher, an agent or a publisher? He said, I don't think much of that idea. So obviously he comes from a different field. So I wheedled and begged and everything, and he ended up doing it. So he owns the publishing company.
well, good for you.
And so
Well, you know,
most of them I've done more with him than any other.
that is pretty much the story that's happening right now, is because it's like the wild, wild west when it comes to publishing. And why, you know, the publishers now are not promoting or marketing your book. You're having to hire an editor, you're having to hire a publicist, but you've got to give almost all the proceeds of the book to the publisher. Why not do it yourself? You know, but my first book, I got the rights back and published it myself. And then my second book, I went with a friend of mine and a very small publisher and published it. And I really can see the difference between somebody who believes in you or your commodity.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why we started the Writers Club, so that we could have authors talk to beginner authors or seasoned authors and just talk about, you know, things that they've learned through we should have you come and do a program for our Writers Club. I think you'd be an excellent source of information on the process that you've gone through with your publishing and your books. And so how do you market them? Do you do it all yourself then, Betty?
I came from marketing. That was my profession for all those years, was marketing. So I do a lot myself. I have an awesome, over the years, I think if you say, you have to realize that you can't do everything yourself. So the way to look at it is that find yourself a really good team. Find yourself the people that will work with you and are cooperative, and have people that have the skills that you're weakest in, or the skills that, you know.
Boy, you hit the nail on the head, right, Robert Waltney? I've got the best team in the world right now with my International Book Club, because it's true. I've been doing it all myself, and it's, you know, the older we get, the harder it gets. So I cannot thank my team enough. So,
and you just get very burnt out from trying to do it all yourself.
Yeah, exhausting, but I love it so much. There's nothing
I
I love to do
know.
more than
Um,
promote authors, and their books. In fact, I love to do theirs. I'm not so good at doing my own, but I really, really, when I get behind a book, like all of our book club selections, I want to put you out there as much as I can. And we're coming up with even more ideas on how to do that. So
I think it's very hard to promote your own self, your own product. I will talk about my books. I'll tell everybody about them. I'll tell you the story. I'll read from the books. But I will never, ever say to somebody, I'm the worst salesman in the world. Dick is a salesman. I will never say, buy my book. I say, you know what? If you want, I'll send you a copy. I mean, it's just the way it is. I'm just not a sales type person. I love the books and I love the stories and I love to talk about them. So that part is easy enough, but I'll never ask for a sale, ever, ever.
yeah, I'll do that
When I
for
was
you.
in marketing,
I'll do that for you. Now, Betty, I want to open it up to everyone that's here. We have all writers here tonight, and I want to let them talk to you a little bit about any questions they might have on your books and
great.
process. Who wants to go first?
Somebody ask a question so I don't
Sure,
feel
I
left
can go.
alone.
Robert's going to go.
So Betty, 24 books in 11 years.
I know. That's
That is-
what I'm saying. Oh my God.
It's so impressive. So what does your daily writing schedule look like?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that? Let me
Sure.
make this a little louder.
Sure. So you've written 24 books in 11 years, which is extremely impressive. What's your writing schedule like? Do you write daily?
Every day, just about. I write every day, but I try to stop when I think every story has a point where, if you're writing a scene, you get to a point where now you're starting to struggle as you're going over to the next scene, or you get stuck and it seems like it's kind of lumbering along instead of flowing. And when that happens, usually I'll get up and walk away. Sometimes if I go get a cup of tea or something and come back, it'll be, once I take the pressure off. I think it's very hard to sit in front of the screen and see what it is you're doing wrong. So I write pretty much every day. I think of my story when I usually walk in the morning, and I'll think of what scene I'm going to write and what part of the book I'm in, and what the character is like. And I just write in plain old word. I know I've been promising myself for years that I learned script, what is it?
Scrivener.
Scrivener, yeah. And I don't know what it is. Every time I say, well, when I finish this book, I'll learn Scrivener. And then I start another book and I say, well, when I finish this book, I'll learn Scrivener, but I don't. So yeah, and I think it's, right when you're inspired, but if you're really not inspired, don't torture yourself to keep sitting there at the computer. Walk away and the thought will come to you like that once you walk away. But if you sit there, it'll never come to you.
That's so true. That kind of reminds me of when I'm painting, I take photographs of the stages and I walk away. And when I look at the photograph, I see what I need to do next. I can't explain it. And I know Robert Waltney just went on a writer's retreat and he records himself reading out loud. And I do that too. I always read out loud what I've written, because if it doesn't sound like me, I change it. It's got to be. But so, is there any particular process that you do that's different?
No, I wish if there's a process, I wish to God I'd find it so I didn't have to work so hard.
Do you outline your books?
No. You know what? I have tried. I must have 10 books on why you should outline it. And I believe every single one of them. And I did an outline for the Summer of New Beginnings. And I wrote 10,000 words in an outline. And then I went totally off of it by the time I was at chapter 3. So, it's just like, I've done that so many times, and for some reason, I think because I'm so character driven, that to me is the whole key to the story. If you know your character, the rest of the story will fall into place, but you have to know your character, and you have to know not just that they stole this pocketbook and ran and jumped on the subway, but why? Was there something in there? Was it an emotional thing that triggered it? I mean, if you know that, and what they'll do when they get around the corner with it, or anything else, whatever's going to happen, you have to know emotionally why that's happening. Because if you know that, then the story will come to you. My latest book is When I Last Saw You, and this is actually a story that's taken from my family, and I should be ashamed to admit it because he was a terrible, scandalous father. Not my father, it was a grandfather that I never knew. And both my mom was one of 11 children, and she was a baby. And then by the time she got married late and I came along, everybody that's in the story pretty much was dead. So, but I used to hear my mom all the time talking about, gee, I wonder where Dalford is, or I wonder where Willard is. And she'd tell me stories of her childhood and how it happened with her father and everything. So I felt comfortable writing that because I knew the inside emotions involved in the story. But before I started this, I started another book. And it was set in San Francisco during the 1906 earthquake. That's the one that's coming out next October. And I got about 20,000 words in, and I said, I can't do this. This book, I'm just not getting it. I loved what I had written, but I had gotten to the point where she had to be enough emotionally involved to make the story come together. And I said, the mindset of a woman who lived in 1906 is so different than the mindset of a woman that lives today. Today, it's so totally different. And after I wrote this other book about my family, which I did know the mindset of, I started to see what all those differences were and where I was making my mistake, where I was going off the road, if you will. But that was because I had that experience of that book. So then I went back, and that book flew right through.
Wow.
I finished it, and it came out great. I hear the thunder. I finished it, and it came out great. But you know what? There was a point that I couldn't write it. And the reason I couldn't write it was because I didn't know the emotional depth that I needed for that character. So if it depends. See, if you write, I think you can outline if you write plot-driven stories. If you write plot-driven stories, this happens. So you've got the basics there. However, if you write a character-driven story, you just never know where they're going to go off the road.
It's true.
I mean, you have to let yourself follow that, whatever runs down the rabbit hole.
That's right.
So I think that's what it is. And I guess I wrote that many books because I didn't feel like it was work so much. I felt like I was getting a chance to do what I want. My mom was a storyteller. Oh, boy, bless her heart. She gave me a love of storytelling.
That's so important. It really is.
So I think
you hear that thunder? Wow. It's really coming through. Anybody else want to jump in? Ask Betty any question? Yes, Kathy.
Betty, I've had a couple weeks, and I just want to say how much this hour I've spent with you has meant. So I first wanted to say that. The second thing is, you went from someone who said, I don't have any stories, to 24 books. Can you tell us about the moment that you decided you had a story?
I don't know that there was. I think.
So what made you sit down and start?
I was working, and I was the vice president of marketing. And the step above me, I reported to the president. So there was nowhere to go other than that. And, I don't know, I'm always interested in growing and learning something new or moving forward. So there was nowhere to go because the president was there, you know, and they would never make a girl the president.
I did nonprofit marketing too. I know it. I know where you were.
So, so, you know, I was feeling kind of at loose ends, if you will. So I used to go to the gym every morning, which amazes me now. I can't imagine how I had time enough to get up, go to the gym, come home, wash my hair, and go to work. Now I can barely drag my butt out to take the dog out. But you know, I'd go to the gym and I'd be on the treadmill or the Stairmaster or something, and I'd be watching television, and you know, they have the same news over. And after, you know, after you've seen it in 10 minutes, it gets kind of old. So I started thinking, you know, I should write a book. And so I started thinking the first book I ever wrote has never seen the light of day. It was, if you can believe this, most of the books I write now are about 80,000 words. When I Last Saw You is longer because there was just more to that story that I had to tell. But they're mostly around 80,000. That's what I shoot for. That book was 160,000 words that I wrote, and it has never seen the light of day. And you know, it was I guess I must have been reading mysteries at the time. It was this mystery that rambled on and on and on. And then I had an opportunity that the company I was with was splitting up, and the president was starting a new firm, and it was almost a competitive firm, if you will. And he took me aside and said, will you come with me? Well, you know, we already had a vacation home that we bought down in Florida that we used to just try to get away as often as we could to come down here and, you know, spend a long weekend or spend a week and 2 weekends, you know. And so I said, well, if I could work out of my house, not mentioning right away that my house was going to be in Florida. And so he said, okay, no problem. So I said, well, you know, we're planning to spend most of our time in Florida now because he knew we had a place down
Oh
here.
my God.
He said, well, that's no problem. I tell you, it was the best job I never had. I mean, because I was here and I just did something once in a while. They didn't have a whole lot to do because they were a startup company. And I had to fly up when they had a meeting or something. But, you know, then I had time to write. And I joined a writers group here in Port St. Lucie. And we'd go to the meetings and I'd write a page or two, or, you know, I started, what story was I working on then? Oh, I think I was working on that crazy story that was so long, and it was rambling on and on. And you know, they critique, well, I like this or I don't like that. And then I'd hear some people would say, oh, the comma's in the wrong place. And I always still to date put the commas in the wrong place. But you know, that's why God gave his editors. But you know, I learned a lot just listening to other people, what they would say they liked or didn't like. And then I got to the point, once I started writing, I read tons and tons and tons of books. And every time I read a book, I'd read it. And if I found myself enjoying the book, I'd say, okay, why am I enjoying this book? What is it about this book that was better than the last book or the other book? Or if I wasn't liking a book, I'd say to myself, what am I not liking about this book? You know, if I'd be 50, 60 pages in and the character's like, who cares? You know, who cares what happens to this chick that's complaining all the time? You know, I would say, okay, now why did I not like her? You know, so little by little, I think I picked up on that. And I think that naturally, and my husband will definitely attest to this because I make him crazy. I think naturally, I have a compassionate nature and can feel what other people feel. And I think that's something that's either in your personality or it's not. And I don't think it's what makes you a better writer or anything. I think it just helped me to move into character roles, so to speak. But the first book I wrote was about a picture that was a painting, and it was twins, and one was separated from the other, and one was murdered, and the second one found the painting. And oh, you know, it was, when I tell you, it was this long and very involved story.
Have you ever thought about going back and addressing that book again and maybe
It's
editing.
160,000 words.
You could cut it down.
But I think along the way, well, the problem with doing that, I think, Kathy, is I think when you start to build a following, those people trust the books that you sell.
Right.
And if you gave them honest women's fiction, or women's fiction that had Southern tone or had an uplifting feel and everything, and then you gave them something like that, they'd say, hey, what, I spent $5 for this and I didn't get what I wanted. So, I feel it wouldn't be fair, really. It would, I don't know.
And you evolved so much from your first book. I know Pat Conroy, I said, I want a copy of The Boo, which was the first book. And he goes, no, you don't. But you do not want that book. It was actually published, but it went out of print. I think you can get it now. But when I read it, I understood why he didn't want me to read it. But I also found it fascinating because that book, as we progressed through his writing, you could see how he grew as a writer. And that's why the Pulpit Queens and Timber Guys International Book Club like to invest in our authors, because not every book is going to be that gigantic bestseller, but every book has a story that leads to the next. And I've found oftentimes it's a book way down the road that's my favorite, rather than the very first book that I picked of the authors. So you keep reading, you invest in your authors.
The author community, I think, is a very generous and loving one. I'll tell you, I think any number of people helped me along the way. And I mean, I was so dumb, I didn't even know the questions to ask. I honestly mean it. When I signed my first book contract where they charged so much, I mean, I honestly didn't even know what to ask. And the first time I hit the USA Today bestseller list, Stina Holmes, you probably have heard of her. She and I are friends, and we were in this little group on Facebook, where we group of authors that kind of helped each other and talked about the business and everything. And I was on Facebook and she said, hey, Betty, congratulations, you made the USA Today bestseller list. And I said, oh yeah, when pigs fly. I didn't believe it at all. But it's a very giving community with authors.
Well, you can sure see it here tonight, for sure.
What somebody do? I mean, really, if somebody asks me a question or something, I'm very quick. When I'm doing a speaking engagement and I see other authors on there that are attending, I always give, if I see their name popping up, because I broadcast from my phone, now I'm on my laptop, but I broadcast from my phone over here, and I keep my big computer here, and I can read all the comments on it. So if I see that one of them are on here, I say, oh, my friend Stina Holmes is here, and she wrote that really fantastic book, da-da-da-da. And sometimes it's the latest book that I've read or made note of, and sometimes it's one that's a couple of years old. But, I never fail to mention and give them a nod, because I think that, everybody needs it. Everybody needs it. And it's, what? Readers do not read just one book. There's no one sitting at home waiting for me to write another book. I know that. So they might as well read other books while they're, waiting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I loved you asking me a question, and thank you for that very kind, those kind words. It really touched my heart.
Want to say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Kathleen.
Hi, Betty. I missed your post, I think this morning on Breathless and Bubbles. I'll go back and look, but I loved your post. I guess it was yesterday. Is that when you shared about your doggy?
Yeah.
And I want to tell you tonight, I love your transparency. I love your honesty about how you write and your process, that you own 10 books on how to outline. And, I tried to outline my first novel a long time ago, and it was a 16-year effort. And in the end, I ended up redoing the whole thing and threw out the outline. And I don't outline. I always kind of have an idea, maybe what's going to happen, or I may put some chapter headers ahead in the manuscript. which is what I'm doing now. And that kind of serves as a roadmap. But then I'm like, no, that scene, I don't think that scene that I've been dreaming about may not make it. But here's my question. So you write every day, when you go to bed at night, are you able to turn off the brain?
Not very well. That's the downside of it, not very well. Actually, I'll tell you my secret. It's not really so secret. When we go to bed at night, and we now have Peacock, which is one of the newer channels, and they have a lot of the old comedies on there. But before Peacock, we had to look for something, and I always landed on Hallmark. And at Hallmark at 11:30 started showing the Golden Girls, the reruns of the Golden Girls. Now they're 100 years old probably, and I've probably seen each one of them 5 times. But when we go to bed, I would put that on, and Dick would say, "Oh God, it's the old ladies again." He called them the old ladies. But it was mindless entertainment that took me away from what I was thinking of all the time and let me go to sleep. So usually it would be something like that, but I am a terrible sleeper. That's the downside.
Mhm.
And
Understand.
sometimes, to be perfectly honest, if I'm really tired and if I've had one of those nights when I just couldn't sleep, or I was thinking, and I'm thinking about everything, and Dick says, "Why do you start thinking about this right before we go to bed?" And it's true, sometimes I do. But if I'm tired in the afternoon, I go take a nap. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think you should write when you feel the inspiration to write. And if the inspiration isn't there, be a little kind to yourself, because it's not going to come back if you beat yourself in the head, that's for sure.
That's good advice. Really good
Yeah.
advice. Any others any other comments or anything?
I just want to say, as an adoptive mother, that I really appreciate the book about the birth mother.
Oh,
I've thought often about my daughter's birth mother, and don't write the book. My daughter's 22, because I'm not quite ready and she's not quite ready for it. I dream about them meeting,
but
like not at night. but
maybe if you maybe if you wrote the book, it would be a tie between the two of you that would be unbreakable. I mean,
I'm
just
definitely going to
you
write
tell
a
me,
book about
have you
us.
read Baby Girl? Have you read Baby
I
Girl?
want to now. I didn't know
Um,
about Baby Girl. And
It's not
so
that expensive.
that's what
$5
Kathy does
or
for us, is that she finds books that we might not know about.
yeah.
Didn't know.
Get them all. Get them all.
But write the book, because if you do that, yeah, and you know what? Don't just sit down to write a book. But sit down and think about how you felt when you were going through that, how you anticipated that she was going to come into your life, how anxious you were before she came into your life, what you were feeling, and how life felt empty without her. And and when here she was, God bless you, this squirming bundle of little joy, that you could hardly believe she was who she was. But if you write the things that you honestly felt, and very obviously you did feel that, it will be a bestseller, hands down, really. I mean, because you're writing from your heart.
From your mouth. I'm gonna quote you on that one. But I know both my kids have stories that I want to write. Both of them.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Betty, so much for taking time out of their busy schedule, because still, again, 24 books in 11 years. Hello, I've had a lot of prolific authors, but I don't think any of them have written that many books in that time span. So you go, girl. And I keep watching those Golden Girls. And what's funny about it is they're way younger than me now. And we considered them old ladies, which but I actually knew one of them, and she was one of my authors. So I had a ball with her too. But anyway, you have a wonderful week. We'll look forward to your. I've got all your posts ready to go up this week, so we have the one for tomorrow.
Wow.
We had a little glitch at first getting them downloaded, but they're ready to go. So we'll be looking forward to it.
You'll find that some of the stories are about my family and everything, and they're rather, I come from an unorthodox family, so anything goes.
Well, we love the story behind the story, and that's what this is all about. It's all about the story.
And I enjoyed meeting everybody so much. I really did.
Thank you for sharing your stories with you, and we'll see you tomorrow morning on Breathless Bubbles and Books. So
Okay.
good night, all from Murphy's Law, and we will. This will be downloaded and put up on my Kathy L. Murphy channel. If you subscribe and click the bell icon, it'll notify you when it's up. But I'll send you a copy, Betty, so you'll have it to share with all of your fan base, and we'll get it to you. But have a great night. And I know it's thundering and lightning here, so I've been praying that I wouldn't get cut off, and we made it. We made it, everybody. So good night. We'll see you Saturday night with the Book and Film Club. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you again, Kathy.
Thank you, Betty. Bye-bye.